So I'm Sang Kim, head of chemical engineering, and I'm here to introduce Vivek Narsimhan. As many of you know, there is the first Professor Narsimhan of ABE, and so Vivek grew up here, right here in West Lafayette. Went on to do his undergraduate degree in chemical engineering at Caltech, followed by a PhD at Stanford, and then postdoctoral studies at MIT. Before we were able to convince him to come back to West Lafayette to join the faculty here at Purdue, where he is engaged in fundamental research in fluid mechanics. And in addition to his role here at Purdue, Vivek is very active in the American Institute of Chemical Engineers, where in the fundamentals area 1J, which is fluid mechanics, he's currently chair and organizer of the fluid mechanics conferences at the annual meeting. Vivek's research area is in complex fluids and rheology with biological applications as well as fundamental research questions. So without further ado, let me ask Vivek to come forward and give his talk. Thank you.
So everything good? Yes. All right, so thanks everyone. So my name is Vivek Narsimhan. I'm an associate professor of chemical engineering at Purdue. And today I'm going to give a lot of thank yous. There is a very famous African proverb that says, "It takes a village to raise a child." I think what's more appropriate in this context is that it takes a village to raise an assistant professor. And instead of just celebrating our associate professors, what we're really celebrating are the students, the faculty, the family, and friends. Basically, everyone that made the journey possible. And so I'll be saying lots of thank yous throughout. And I think many of you are here. I'll give shout outs throughout the presentation. All right? So let's just start a little bit with my journey. So I grew up in this small town called West Lafayette, Indiana. From a very young age, I grew up learning that Purdue is the greatest thing in the world. Here is a picture of me in second grade. That's actually my yearbook photo. And I went to the local high school here, so I went to West Lafayette High School, and that's a picture of me during graduation with my two parents, my mother, my father, and my younger brother, Karthik, as well. Right? And so after I finished, high school, I did my undergrad in sunny California, and I was able to play tennis all day. And then I did my master's at University of Cambridge in mathematics, and I was not able to play tennis all day due to the weather, but I was able to enjoy finer aspects in life like formal dinners and exploring Europe. But what the key thing that came out of all this was I did lots of research and took lots of courses, and I found kind of my calling. So when I did all this, I found out I really enjoyed my classes in fluid mechanics. Especially the mathematical aspects of it, and that's what I took, especially in Cambridge. I also really enjoyed all the polymer physics courses I took at Caltech from Professor Zhangong Wang, and learning the statistical physics associated with it. And so I wanted to do something in my career that would kind of combine these two. So I ended up, my next portion of my journey is I went to Palo Alto, went to Stanford, and I worked with a wonderful professor. Professor Eric Schockfey. He's one of my closest mentors. I still talk to him quite a bit today. And during my PhD, I was able to do a lot of work really in the area of biofluid mechanics, looking at computational models for red blood cell flows, droplets, cells, cellular flows, etc. After I'd finished that, I hopped over to the other Cambridge in Boston. I worked with Professor Patrick Doyle And we were actually doing some very interesting research in the area of polymer physics, specifically looking at dynamics of entangled polymers, looking at knotted polymers. And I did some simulations and worked with lots of experimentalists doing single molecule studies. All right? So towards the end of my postdoc, what ended up happening was I met actually Professor Sang-Tae Kim at the AICHE conference. And he came up to me during a poster session and he encouraged me to really consider Purdue as a possible place to start my faculty career. I remember when I first met Sang, I was actually starstruck because I remember reading all his papers when I was a young graduate student and really pouring through all his textbook. For people who don't know, he wrote the Bible, basically, in the Stokes Flow community. And I still look at this textbook today. And sometimes some students still come to him and ask him questions. But Sang really tried to convince me, saying that Purdue is a really wonderful place to start your career as an assistant professor. And now that I've gone through it, I totally agree with him. It is actually, it provides a lot. A lot of the faculty are very supportive towards assistant professors. They want to make sure that you succeed. But specifically, I want to thank 4 people who helped me out throughout this time here during my assistant professorship. So Sang and Ramki were my academic mentors who tried to get me through the ins and outs of what it's like to be an assistant professor. And during that time, we had lots of really nice conversations about how grant proposals to write, but we also were able to publish some papers together, which was very interesting. I have an advantage that I have a family member who is also on the faculty, my father. And what's great about this is that whenever I had questions or anything about research, I could always make a phone call to him. And it was very helpful, especially at the beginning when you're very stressed out. He was always was able to show me to see the forest from the trees and say, look, there's no need to stress out. Stress doesn't really do anything. Just kind of power on. And I think one great thing about Purdue also is that there's a really good faculty network here. Alumni network, and alumni are really want to see the future of Purdue improve, and that means also seeing the success of young faculty. And so I was very fortunate to have encountered Michael Ott during my assistant professorship, and he wanted to really make sure that young professors succeed, and he's been given a named professorship as well. And of course, I cannot thank my wife enough, Swara. I met her during my time as an assistant professor, and she's my rock. She keeps me grounded, and so very, very happy that I get to be with her every day. All right, so let's just talk about what I do. All right, so what are my areas of research? My research areas are in non-Newtonian fluids, biofluids, and heat and mass transfer. So for people who don't know, what is a non-Newtonian fluid? So when people talk about non-Newtonian fluids, they typically refer to some type of liquid that has some type of internal structure. The internal structure gives rise to viscosity that either varies with shear rate, or the material itself will then behave in between that of a liquid and a solid. And so there are many examples that you see actually in our everyday lives, like gels, pastes, suspensions and slurries, polymer solutions and melts, oil and water, mixtures which are known as emulsions, foams, and biofluids. So these are all examples of non-Newtonian fluids. And so the people who study non-Newtonian fluids are called rheologists. And the goal of a rheologist is really to basically understand how these systems behave, how to model them, and also how to engineer them for useful applications. Okay? So this is still pretty broad. So my lab is really broken into 3 main areas. So one area kind of works on suspension, which is particulates in liquids. We also have another subgroup kind of working in the area of droplets and biofluids. And then I have a third subgroup kind of doing general problems in heat and mass transfer. And these are just mostly initiated from collaborations within chemical engineering. Okay. And so these are really the stars of the show, right? They're the ones who are in the trenches doing the work. And they're really the reason why I adore my job, right? So I've been very fortunate to have had very talented, hardworking intellectually curious students during my time here as an assistant professorship. I've graduated about 3 PhD students and several postdocs. And right now I have about 10 students split between PhDs and postdocs as well. And what's great about having motivated students is that scientific progress just naturally comes about. And we've had several papers, patents, and book chapters, et cetera, that came out during this time as an assistant professor. What's wonderful about chemical engineering, and I saw this when I visited Purdue, but also it became readily apparent as I started my first few years on a job, is that what's great about the department is the collegiality of all the faculty. All the faculty get along quite well. They are very interested in collaborating with each other, and because of that, I've started many collaborations I didn't even envision when I first started here in my job. So I just want to thank all the faculty that I currently have collaborations with, and of course, if you want to continue collaborating, other people want to continue collaborating, I'm always open to do so. But I want to thank my father, Professor Ganesan Narsimhan, Bill Clark, Alina Alexenko, Doraswamy Ramkrishna, Arzu Artakani, Osman Basran, and Sangtae Kim. I specifically want to thank Alina Alexenko because she introduced me to the field of pharmaceutical engineering, specifically in the area of freeze drying, and got me involved in the LioHub, which is a big consortium of faculty involved in really trying to figure out how to accelerate freeze drying in pharmaceuticals. So I won't have time to talk about all of these things because then I'll just be talking all day long. But what I'll do is I just want to give you just a brief highlight of just 2 of the research problems that I've been working on. Okay. So the first area that my lab's very much interested in is thinking about particles and polymeric fluids. So these type of systems are found in many areas in material science, but also in biology. So some examples are whenever you're dealing with polymer composites. So in a lot of the plastics that you deal with, they often have fillers in them, right? Nanoparticle fillers to basically reduce manufacturing costs or to tune the material properties. But anytime they're processed, they're always processed in the melt state. So you always have particles and a polymeric fluid. You see these type of systems also in 3D printing, for example. In biology, you see them all the time. A canonical example is bacterial motion in mucus are particles moving in some type of polymeric fluid. And so some of the things that we're interested in the group is, okay, so how do particles move in polymeric fluid? How do you describe the microhydrodynamics of this? Can you develop theories? Can you develop experiments to understand this in more detail? Right? And so one of the things that we're interested in is one specific phenomenon. This is what's known as a viscoelastic lift. So it turns out when you have particles in polymeric solutions or melts, it's actually notoriously difficult to keep things well mixed. For example, if you flow a suspension in a tube, what ends up happening is the particles experience lift forces, and they generally focus in specific regions and channels. Okay? So these lift forces, which arise due to what are known as normal stresses, they've actually, in the last 15 years or so in the rheology community, people have started realizing they have a lot of applications in many areas. So they're important now in particle sorting and separation because you can now use these lift forces to separate particles by shape and size in all types of microfluidic applications. It turns out they're also important in many other applications like hydraulic fracturing in the oil and gas industry, and also what is known as nonlinear microrheology. There's still actually a lot of open questions in this field about these lift forces, about particle shape, confinement, rheology, concentration, geometry. And so what we wanted to do was just answer some basic questions at the beginning about this. So one of my first PhD students, what he did was he was able to develop some theories to describe basically if you put particles in a polymeric fluid and in some type of pressure-driven flows, different types of pressure-driven flows, can you characterize the lift forces that are created, the trajectories, and understand what's going on? So we did basically develop these theories in the limit of weak viscoelasticity. We were able to characterize the trajectories and understand the role that particle shape plays. And specifically, we're able to get scaling laws from this and relate why the scaling laws are related to the orientation dynamics as they tumble while they're flowing through these type of geometries. Now, in addition to doing theories, we wanted to see how well they actually play out in real life. So what we did is we did some experiments as well. We basically just took some polystyrene spheroidal particles, put them in a polymeric liquid, which is a PVP solution, flow them through a straight microfluidic channel, and then essentially at the bottom what we did is we imaged the probability distribution function of where all the particles lie at different points in the channel, and we're able to compare what we get from experiments to what we get from simple scaling analyses and theories. Okay. Now, what we've done is, we're actually now interested in kind of looking at more other areas outside of this one specific thing to really understand this phenomenon in more detail. We've actually started collaborations with Arzu Ardakani in mechanical engineering, and have several grad students working on this as well. And we have actually started thinking about using different imaging techniques to characterize the 3D position and orientation of particles in these type of fluids as well. Okay. So the next thing I want to talk about are just what are known as complex droplets and vesicles. And so this is work with Osman Basran and also Charles Schroeder and Sang-Tae Kim. Okay? So one thing that we're very much interested in this lab is a system of what are known as droplets that have some type of viscoelastic membranes. So there are many situations where you see droplets with some type of with a membrane or a skin that has some type of elastic or viscous behavior. And it turns out when you have these situations, the dynamics of the droplet, right, the deformation and all that is determined not just by surface tension, but now the mechanical properties of the interface, which is known as interfacial rheology in the community. Okay. So there are many examples of where one sees this in applications. So examples are cells and vesicles. These are essentially droplets that have a phospholipid membrane or a cytoskeletal membrane, right? You can have capsules for drug delivery, which have polymer membranes. You can have Pickering emulsions, which are particles which are droplets with particles on them. So these are armored droplets. And then in food applications, of course, you always have proteins on droplets as well, which are protein-stabilized droplets. So in the community, for the droplet community, people have looked at and tried to understand breakup, coalescence, and all these different things, and that's been well studied. But it turns out when you have these type of elastic and viscous skins on droplets, there's actually still a lot of open questions in the community about how does the mechanical properties of these interfaces alter processes like sedimentation, deformation, and breakup and coalescence. So one broad research area is trying to really answer these type of questions. All right. And so one project we looked at is we looked at a specific system of a droplet which has a type of viscous membrane, okay? And we wanted to understand how does this, what is known as surface viscosity, alter the dynamics of the droplets, okay? And so we were able to develop simulations and theories of this, and we were able to answer questions about how does the surface viscosity, for example, alter sedimentation behavior. So what happens when you form these instabilities that form these thin threads that eventually lead to breakup? We were able to look at, for example, droplet breakup in different flows, what happens during stretching, what are the critical capillary numbers, and then when you turn off the flow, what happens during relaxation, and you get these end pinching events. We also were able to look at coalescence behavior. So if you have two droplets coming towards each other, what is the drainage behavior between the two droplets, and how does it affect coalescence efficiency? Right? And so we published several papers on this. Another topic that we did that's not just these droplets with viscous membranes, but we also looked at another system which are known as vesicles, which are essentially droplets with a phospholipid membrane on them. And these are important in cell signaling and transport, drug encapsulation, and also they're a model system for all types of cell membranes because the most common component of a cell membrane is a phospholipid membrane, is a phospholipid bilayer. So some of the questions we're interested in is, okay, how do these systems deform under non-equilibrium conditions, like flows that are typically found in physiological conditions? So we actually developed some theories and simulations to look at what happens during these situations. We looked at first the case when we have only one type of lipid on the interface. And we've developed theories and simulations, and we were able to work with experimental collaborators at UIUC who developed this clever system where you can essentially hydrodynamically trap individual vesicles and stretch them under precise flows to really look at the deformation. And you can do a one-to-one comparison between theory and experiments. So now you can really get a better idea what are the tensions that are developed, what are the deformation, what are the conditions that can lead to breakup. But some of the things we're thinking about right now is actually, okay, what happens if you have multiple lipids on a membrane? It turns out when you have multiple lipids on a membrane, you can actually get phase separation on these interfaces. You get these splotchy structures. They play a major role in the formation of what are known as lipid rafts in biology, which plays a major role in biology and signal transduction, and also play a major role in budding and fusion. And so the question is, how, again, does flow alter the phase and coarsening behavior? What are the biological significance in these non-equilibrium conditions? So we started answering some questions about looking at these fluid instabilities that occur during this phase separation, and also look what happens when you put these vesicles under different types of flows. We developed theories, and now we're in the process of working with people to look at some experimental work as well. So last thing I want to talk just about is some teaching and outreach. So I teach several courses here at Purdue and related to heat and mass transfer and transport phenomena. So transport phenomena is just a catch-all term that Mel calls heat transfer, mass transfer, and fluid mechanics. So I just want to give a specific shout-out to several mentors for my teaching. So Professor Dave Cordy and Professor Julie Liu, when I first came in, he gave lecture notes to me when I taught the undergrad, and I've been using those lecture notes, and they've been very, very helpful. But I specifically want to thank Julie Liu as well, because I had the opportunity of co-teaching when I first joined, and I came from a small institution where class sizes were about only 20 people. Never saw anything above 20 in a class. So joining that and throwing in a class of 100 people is it's a whole another beast. But she taught me, she taught me how to think about how to organize courses, how to, lesson plan, how to, I would say, deal with all the administrative back-end stuff as well. And, even I learned a lot about lecturing style as well. And I really appreciate everything that you've done. One thing I do think was great was that I've been able to, after this, also mentor other postdocs who were interested in teaching. So one semester I was able to mentor a postdoc from Jim Carruthers' lab who was interested in going to a teaching career. And afterwards he was able to luckily become a teaching faculty at the South Dakota School of Mines as well. One thing I like to do outside of research is I like to do outreach as well, because the community, West Lafayette community, has given so much to me during my so far, and I really want to give back to the community that's done a lot. So some things I do, right? So I'm the faculty advisor for the Omega Chi Epsilon. This is the Honors Chemical Engineering Society in Chemie. And every year they do an event that's known as the Chemie Kids Day. So it's an event that's basically for 3rd to 5th graders in the local Lafayette area. About 150 to 200 people. And so every year we have a day-long event with all these types of science demonstrations. Some of them are like with non-Newtonian fluids. Some of them are with making soap and ice cream and all those cool things. And there's actually a nice video on YouTube if you want to look and see all the different activities that happened in 2019, where I actually did a demonstration. Okay. I'm also involved in the Imagination Station. So this is a local science center in Lafayette that serves basically the Northwest Indiana area. And so it's mainly for kids that are between, I would say, kindergarten to about 3rd grade. So I'm on the board, so I'm the board secretary. What all that means is I just meet once a month with everyone else on the board to talk about the strategy for the vision for this science center. But just want to give a shout out. There's a lot of really interesting exhibits. If you have young children, it's a great place to do science as well. And sometimes we even have the Omega Chi Epsilon come and do some of the science exhibits there as well. Other activities, this has happened just a few times. But, every once in a while, I end up just becoming a judge at the First Robotics. This is what I did actually when I was in high school. And the kids nowadays are way better off now than we were when I was there. And once I actually did some demonstrations for kids through Purdue Women Engineering, and just to teach them about surface tension. Right? So that's really it. Again, this is not the thank you. This is really a thank you to everyone else. You guys made this journey possible. So I'm open to any questions. Mm-hmm.
Hey, I have the microphone here if we have any questions for Vivek.
Great to see you, Vivek.
Yeah.
And,
Great to see you as well.
memories go back many years.
I know.
But a thought that crossed my mind is so many great projects that you have, so many great problems that you're working on.
Yep.
And with applications that could very easily connect to health and human health and biomedical engineering in general, and particularly with Purdue Indianapolis coming up and your association with them. Are you broadening out into human health and biomedical engineering and connecting to Professor Sangtai Kim's question about NIH applications and so forth?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess at the moment I have not applied to any NIH funding yet. Most of my funding is actually through NSF, but I do think that is an area that I would eventually like to get into. Actually, I've been talking with Bill, for example, on areas of dialysis and trying to, for example, come up with different ways of doing designing dialyzer membranes, and that could have applications, for example, in for people who have kidney disease. And so I think even the areas about vesicles and all, I think there are certain applications. It's something I plan to do in the future. I haven't quite gone to it yet because I know for NIH you need lots and lots of preliminary data before anything really comes about, I feel.
Yeah. Many of your sentences are going to start now that tenure is out of the way, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Any other questions? Oh, way over here.
So great presentation. This is a kind of out of the box question, but have you ever been driving and you got inspiration from something that was not even anything remotely close to your research, but you were staring at a tree or you were talking to someone or in the shower? We had a professor in grad school that told us the idea for his dissertation came when he was taking a shower one day. Just curious, have you had an experience where you had a light bulb moment where you really weren't thinking about this, but there was something that your attention landed on, and it was this wow moment that kind of unleashed a lot of what you talked about here?
Well, so I would say that maybe not like, so I do think a lot in the shower. There's no doubt about it. In fact, Swara complains to me that I take way too long of showers because I'm often thinking about math during while doing these type of things. But most of those thoughts are actually about how to solve specific problems. And I sometimes, when I'm driving, I do these things as well. But I find that actually thinking about the big problems, again, it works differently for different people, right? But for me, like when it comes about the bigger problems, it really comes from talking to other faculty and kind of sitting and brainstorming. But everybody's different in their own way, right? I know lots of people who actually have kind of had that approach and made lots of really stellar contributions that way.
I've noticed sabbatical did not come up in your presentation. Do you contemplate a sabbatical, and how does that map to your big plans for the future?
So I've been thinking, I still haven't quite figured out exactly where I want to do a sabbatical yet, and I may have to talk to you sometime about this.
Okay, I know we've used up the full hour. Are there any other burning questions? If not, let's thank Vivek again. And also a shout out to the Office of the Dean for hosting this wonderful event. Thank you.